Thank you for joining us. Today our guest is Dave Pearson. He is a survivor of a shark attack and he also founded the Bite Club. He lives in Australia. Thank you, Dave, for being here.
Thank you for having me, Mel.
I like to start with 67 seconds rapid fire questions. Yes or no, quick answer, and then we move on to longer questions and answers.
Yep.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee or tea, doesn't really matter.
Beatles or Rolling Stones?
Beatles.
Favorite food?
Oh, anything but mainly steak.
Sunrise or sunset?
Sunsets, we get the best sunsets where I live.
Last music you listened to?
Last music I listened to, can't remember who was singing it, but I listen to a lot of 8 Ball Atkin, who's a blues.
Guilty pleasures?
A beer every now and then.
Short or longboard?
Short.
If not Australia, any other place you'd like to live?
Oh, Pacific Island, maybe.
One thing you will take to deserted island?
Surfboards and foils.
Describe yourself in 3 words.
I'm a good guy. 4 words that was, sorry.
Great, thank you. That was a quick round. Now we're on to questions where you can answer as long as you like. Where were you born?
I was born in the UK, a little town called Hartlepool in the northeast.
How do you transition to Australia?
In 1969, Mum and Dad made the decision to move out to Australia. It was part of, back then, was called the £10 POM program, which was if you had a trade that they needed in Australia, you could move out here and the cost wasn't significant at all. It was £10 to fly out here.
What's your first childhood memory?
First childhood memory, I remember laying in hospital I had a needle stuck in my foot and it had broken off. And I remember looking at my foot, that was all bandaged up.
What happened with your foot? Why was there a needle stuck?
My sister or brother had been doing something and left needles on the carpet, and I stood on it, and it went into the bone in
Oh,
my big toe and broke off. I had to get operated on.
my God. How old were you when you got your first board?
It was a KFC foam surfboard that cost $2.
Wow.
I would have been about 8 year old.
Oh, you did. Wow.
Yeah.
Did you teach yourself, or somebody else, or your parents taught you to?
No, pretty much taught ourselves. We didn't obviously surf in England, but my brother and started surfing about the same time. And the KFC foam, it was just a very small foam board. I actually used to take my dog surfing with me then, but yeah, it was from that I decided I would stand up on a surfboard and start surfing.
Interesting you mentioned about dogs. I see dogs surfing. Is there a special? They seem to be very adept to that. Is that what? Not cats, but I've seen dogs surf with their owners. Is that something?
I think it's because dogs love being with their owners, and if their owners are doing something, the dog wants to be in it. My last dog, he would swim out the back while we were surfing, and I'd have to throw him on my surfboard and paddle back in with him to get him out of the surf. So, yeah, I think dogs just like being
Oh,
with their owners. If their owners are surfing, then the dog will have a crack at it too.
great. I never surfed. I lived around the beach, but I never
Yeah,
surfed. Describe the feeling when you hit the wave. What does it feel like physically?
I think what it is, it's being in the moment. You're on a wave, you're flying for free basically. I also hydrofoil, which is a a different thing to surfing. But I use waves to hydrofoil as well. But it's a feeling of just having a free ride. You can express yourself in any way you like while you're surfing, and I think that's what surfing's about—a bit of expression. But it's also a bit of me time, and we all take that away. You can hang out with your mates while you're doing it, but when you're on a wave, it's just you, and yeah, it's a nice, pleasant feeling.
Do you find being find a body of water meditative?
Yeah, I think so. I remember writing a post, would have been 4 or 5 years ago now, and I mentioned that I must have watched a million waves in my life and imagined myself surfing them. So anytime I can get near the water, I will look at the water. Anytime I get near water that's got breaking waves, I will imagine surfing those waves.
What's your ritual when you go to the beach? Are you going alone with your mates? Beer after?
Uh, well, my partner, she usually comes with me as well. She's a surfer, so it's a couples thing for us. I find waves that will suit both of us. She prefers a longboard and smaller waves, whereas if I'm surfing, I prefer a shortboard and big waves. So if we're surfing somewhere with small waves, I'll go foiling instead, and I'll hydrofoil.
With all the different boards now, what is the best board to get? I read about preparing for our conversation. There's a wooden board. There's different type of modern plastic. There's short fish boards. What is it? Personal preference, or there's some considered the
Yeah,
best for to become a
it
best
would
swimmer?
come down to preferences, like what sort of waves, how do you want to surf? Do you want to surf, I guess, more gymnastically, where you surf a shortboard where you're throwing the board around quite a lot? Or do you want to cruise along on a longboard? And then it becomes down to materials and obviously your skill level as well. Like you can't just go out and buy a high performance surfboard and expect to surf as good as the guys who've been surfing for 20 years. It takes quite a while to get to that level.
Do you think the surfers usually start when they're kids, or it's never too late to start to learn how to surf?
It's never too late. It's obviously the level that you will get to will be different because kids who start very young, which is now, I mean, kids are out there surfing when they're 4 and 5 year old on the decent sized waves. Whereas back in the day, it was, you were 10 or 12-year old by the time you started really surfing. So the level of that the kids are at now by the time they're at the age that I started surfing properly are absolutely rippers. So they surf really well. So if you start late, like my partner, she started late in life when we became a couple. So she loves her longboard, and even though I'm early 60s, she's late 50s. She still is getting better every time, and she's still getting that real buzz of figuring out a new maneuver each time and enjoying the surf.
What makes a great surfer?
A big smile. The guy in the water with the biggest smile is the best surfer.
Tell me what happened on March 23rd of 2011.
Uh, just a normal afternoon surf. Just I'd grabbed a new surfboard the day before, so I was pretty keen to go for a surf, and rang up my neighbour on the way home from work and said, "You want to come down?" So I picked him up when I got home, and we drove out to the beach. Surf was okay, not nothing you would say really special. But when you've got a new surfboard and you're keen for a surf, it's going to be special anyway. So I just paddled out. I was obviously keener than the other guys. I was in the water first, and there was just one other guy out there when I paddled out. And I'd actually caught 3 waves by the time the 2 guys that I'd turned up at the beach with actually got out there. And it was when I was paddling back in after the third wave that a shark decided that I was probably being a bit too greedy or maybe having a bit too much fun, and decided to change the afternoon for a whole different bunch of reasons. And yeah, there was a lot of good things that happened in that moment. And one was I was actually looking off to my left hand side, and the shark came from just off to the right hand side. So I wasn't actually looking at the shark when it hit me. And its bottom jaw got stuck in the surfboard as it came up from underneath, and
Mm.
its nose hit me in the side of the head, and then it flipped out of the water and took me down with it. And that was when my left arm got caught between the surfboard and the top jaw of the shark. And when we were in the water, we kind of wrestled around just for a little bit. Um, Fortunately, once again, I didn't get to see much of the shark. Our eyes don't work that well underwater. There was lots of bubbles and stuff. And the shark and I separated ways underwater, and my board popped to the surface, and I swam up and climbed back on my board and proceeded to try and figure out what had just happened to me. And when I looked at my left arm and saw the forearm muscle hanging off and all the skin obviously torn, I realised it had been a shark. And it was then I became aware, after probably 30 seconds, that someone was actually shouting out to me. And it was the guy who was out in the surf when I paddled out. And he was screaming, Dave, was that a shark? Was that a shark? And I said, yeah, it was a shark. And I was looking at the water and how red the water was going and how far the blood was squirting out of the vein that had been severed in my arm. And I thought, wow, that's not good. And I tried to squeeze the arm to stop bleeding. But I also noticed then, as I was looking at the red water, that there was a fairly sizable bull shark still swimming around underneath me. And I shouted
Mm.
to the guys, yeah, it was a shark. I said, it's got my arm. I said, I'll meet you on the beach. I said, it's still here. I'll get out. I'll meet you on the beach. And I said, I'll be okay. So I put on my weight, like tucked my arm up, put on my weight on my arm, laid on the surfboard and started paddling one arm. And I see a set of waves come through, because the bigger waves come through in a set. You get 3 or 4 at a time. And I thought, beauty, I'll catch the first wave and I'll be out. But because I was paddling out after catching a wave, I wasn't in the right position. And the wave actually just picked me up and drove me to the bottom, where
Mm.
I fell back off the surfboard, and I could feel all of the skin and muscle on my arm flapping around underwater again. And so I sort of clamped my hand on that, which meant I was struggling to swim. So I had to let go of that and try to swim to the surface. And then as soon as I got to the surface, I got hit by the next wave. And that happened for the whole 4 waves of the set. And I was under the water, getting close to what's called a shallow water blackout, when you run out of air and you start seeing all the stars in front of your eyes, and then your vision starts to slowly withdraw. And I thought, well, I'm going to die. And that was a strange feeling, to realise that today was the end of my life. And I went, you know what? I can't die today. I've got two kids, not young kids, but 2 kids. One was 17, the other one was 23. A wonderful partner that I live with. And it was that I thought, no, I can't die today. And I put my feet on the sand. I felt the sand under my feet and just pushed as hard as I could, and popped up to the surface, and obviously sucked in a big breath of air. And it was then, I thought, well, I've got to try and stop this bleeding again, put all my muscles and stuff back together, and put all my weight on it, laid back on the surfboard. And then I heard Aaron, which was the young guy that was out when I got to the beach, and he said, come on, Dave, we're going to help you. And he actually got one of the other guys who turned up to the beach with me to come and help me get out. So they paddled me in through the rip, where as soon as we got to the beach, they pulled off my leg rope and used that as a tourniquet. And we got that as tight as we could to try and stop the bleeding, and call for an ambulance and a helicopter. And in that, the time between obviously the shark attack and getting a tourniquet on my arm, they estimate I've lost nearly 40% of my blood, which is the
Mm.
stage where you start to have heart problems. And they said, come on, we'll carry Dave up the beach. And I said, don't be silly, guys. I said, I can walk. And I sort of half stumbled, and they dragged me up to the picnic table. They threw me on the table and covered me in blankets. My neighbour also grabbed my arm because the tourniquet wasn't working that well. So he then squeezed my arm as well to try and stop the bleeding, and managed to do so, I guess. So we laid there for a while, waited for the ambulance. I was taking my own vital signs at the time to see how I was actually doing. I'd been laying there for probably maybe 10 to 15 minutes by the time I could start feeling a lot of pain. It was basically nothing up until then. My heart rate was up around about 200 beats a minute, which I knew wasn't good
Mm.
because I'd been laying down for 15 minutes. And my hands and feet were also starting to tingle and go numb because, which I later discovered that, once you run out of blood, your heart keeps your brain working, but the rest of your body shuts down, and that's what it was starting to do. So I was talking to the guys at the beach to try and stop them from going into shock and also to try and stop me from going into shock. And the local caretaker from the surf club came over with some oxygen and some more blankets to throw on me. And my partner then, because my mates had rang my partner, she turned up to the beach and she's an assistant nurse. And one of the other guys called his sister, who was also a nurse, and they came down and looked after me until the ambulance got there.
And you mentioned helicopter. Is that a standard procedure in Australia to?
It is because we're so far away from it. We're 45 minutes drive to the closest hospital, and the hospital I ended up at, which is in Newcastle, which is it's a 2 hour drive from here at least, and obviously they're much bigger and a better hospital to deal with this sort of thing. So yeah, and the guy who took control when we got out of the water, he knew I wasn't good, and he just said we're going to need a helicopter because by the time we get him to hospital here, it's going to be possibly too late. So the ambulance got there, and the paramedics proceeded to take my vital signs and then try and get some fluid into my body so that they could stabilise my heart, so they could throw me on a helicopter and fly me off to the other hospital. So I think it happened probably around about 5:30 p.m. and I think it was nearly 9 p.m. by the time we left the beach. It was quite a long afternoon for everybody.
Incredible. You lost about 40% of your blood.
Yeah,
Usually it's a low rate of survival. Do you think
yeah, and
that
that
was a strength and desire to live that pulled you through?
possibly plus, I was 48 at the time. I was probably about as fit as I'd been most of my life. So I was very healthy and very fit and very strong. So I think that helped. Plus, I didn't panic. I knew that if I if I panicked and went into shock, then that would not be good for me at all. So I stayed calm as much as I could the whole time. I talked to everybody. We were actually cracking jokes, and we watched. I said to my partner, 'cause it was a beautiful sunset, and I said, "Well, it's a really not a bad night to die." I said, "Look at the beautiful sunset. We'll get through that." But yeah, I think that was what it was. Yeah, it's very close to 40% is very close to the limit, which you would think for an arm injury was a lot of blood, but the boys said it took probably maybe 10 to 15 minutes to get me out of the ocean. And the whole
Mm.
time that was happening, I was bleeding. Obviously, my heart rate was up because of the fight with the fish and then the paddle to try and get in. And yeah, so all that would have contributed to the amount of blood that I would have lost.
How did you remain? Is that your personality? You remain calm and composed. Usually people would just lose it, which is normal under circumstances.
Yeah, well, usually I'm the guy who, I guess just because of the jobs and stuff I've had, I'm the guy who takes control when shit happens. And I guess
Mm.
because of that, allowed me to. I remember thinking at the time, I heard Aaron, whose nickname's Noddy, I heard him taking charge of everything, and I thought, well, everything that he's saying is the exact same thing that I would be saying. So I felt comfortable straight away that the guys weren't panicking and they were all doing the right thing. So I thought, well, if I'm going to make this, I've got the best bunch of guys around me to help. So I think that's why I stayed calm. If I was on my own, I'm not sure what would have happened. Obviously, whether I would have been able to get out of the ocean to start off with, but plus, if I would have been able to treat myself or somehow stop the bleeding enough to get into the car and drive. So quite often I surf on my own. Well, I used to. I don't much anymore.
At any moment of that, from 5:30 to 9 o'clock, did you feel any higher power interfering in your fate, in your
No,
life?
no. I'm not really a religious person. I've always determined if something is going to happen to me, I'm the one that's going to make that happen. And that's, I have mates who are pastors. I have mates, who are very religious. And one of them actually suggested that I become a pastor one time. And but yeah, I understand people have faith. Myself, I've witnessed, I guess, too many horrible things in my life to realize that, for me, the strength and faith to get through stuff will be within me, and it's going to be up to me to make sure it happens. That's I guess it's the way I look at it. As I said, it was the thought of not being able to see my kids again. I've got a wonderful partner, and I just thought, can't die today. I got too much to live for. That's what got me through it.
How long you've stay in the hospital? How long did it take you to at least go home?
Just over a week. They
Okay.
stitched me up. Once they got everything sorted, um, couldn't do anything with my arm once they fixed all the muscles up. The original intention when I got to hospital, they were going to remove my arm because of the damage to the bone from the shark's teeth. And infection is a major issue when that happens. And they said there was another specialist trauma surgeon coming in the next day, and if I would like to wait, which of course I said yes. And we went into surgery around about, maybe it was 6:30 the next morning. So I'd been awake all night, and I remember the surgeon saying, he said, Dave, this arm might not be here when you wake up. And I said, well, if I'm alive, I said, that's the best thing. I said, I'll learn to live without a left arm. And obviously he did save my arm and did a absolutely brilliant job in the process. So, um, I thank him so much every time I pick up something in my left hand.
Oh, incredible story. How I know the process of healing just began after the surgery that stitched you and left. And I can imagine. I read, listened to your interviews about PTSD and physical and emotional toll it takes this attack took on you. What was your source of inspiration? I know you have personal strength. Have, how did you go through the process, the aftermath of that?
I guess for me, it was a couple of things. One was the nurse the night when I was in hospital, just after they said, look, we're probably going to take your arm off in surgery. He said to me, so you think you'll surf again? I went, wow, that was a difficult question to ask. And I said, I think so. I said, my love of surfing is far greater than my fear of sharks. I said, so I'll figure out a way and I'll be able to surf again. I'll do something. So that planted the seed of determination that I wasn't going to let this beat me, even in, I guess, what you would call one of the darkest times. And then, going forward from that, I always taken all everything that bad happened to me and washed away in the ocean, I guess is the best way to say it. I take solace in the ocean and I take comfort from being in amongst the salt water. So for me to give that away would have been, I guess, heartbreaking and probably life changing, probably to the extent that it would have been a very tough life after that. So I guess that's why I made sure that I got back in the surf. It wasn't easy. I'll have to say, I went to the beach the first weekend that I was out of hospital. And as I walked in the water, everything that was in the water was a shark. And it was
Mm.
really freaky. And I didn't understand why I was thinking like that when, I've been in the ocean thousands of times. And I had to get out. So my arm was all bandaged up and I was in a cast and a sling. So I just walked back out. I was only into my knees anyway. And my partner, she ran past with a surfboard under her arm and paddled out the back as if to say, I can do this, so, you know, you can do it as well. So I stood on the beach, and unfortunately one of my mates pulled up in his car, and he wanted to talk about obviously the attack and what had happened. And so that gave me some time to stay away from the water. And then when he left, I just thought, well, bugger it. And I just walked in as deep as I could. I said to myself, you've done this literally thousands of times. It's no different than any other time. So get out there and get wet. So I did that. And that was a good hurdle for that first day. I got through that and I didn't die. So that was a good thing. And I guess fortunately, my arm was pretty much useless. And I physically couldn't move my arm for 6 weeks. That was the doctor's orders. So it was in a cast that was like a mobile. I couldn't do anything with it. And then I started physical therapy. And I do remember my first day of physical therapy, and they held my arm out and they said, right, bend your wrist. And I said, all right. And it didn't move. And they said, bend your wrist. I said, I am bending my wrist. I said, that's as far as it'll go, which was no movement at all, zero. And they said, wiggle your fingers. Exact the same thing. There was no movement at all. I was astounded that there was zero movement in everything. So then we slowly worked on forcing it to move, which was, I guess, extremely painful. And we worked on an exercise method for my hand and slowly moving it. And for the next few weeks, I started to get a little bit of movement in my hand. And it was probably 12 weeks after the attack that I was watching my partner. She was out surfing. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to have a go at this. And I was on the beach trying to do one-arm push-ups. And I thought if I can do a one-arm push-up, I can do that on the surfboard. I can get to my feet. And that was not working at all. So I got a couple of sticks off the beach and a couple of leg rope ankle straps. And I taped 2 sticks to my arm either side, made another sling, put a strap here and a strap there, and then got a roll of 100-mile-an-hour tape out of the car and taped my whole arm up solid so it wouldn't hurt it when I put weight on it. And I grabbed the surfboard and I paddled out. I had to use my elbow to push on the surfboard and then my hand. That was the only way I could get up. And eventually, after nosediving the surfboard about 20 times, I finally stood up on a wave and caught a wave into the beach. And I thought, wow, I can still do this. And that determination actually to be able to physically surf, actually overcome any thoughts I was having of the shark. I was so determined to make sure I got to my feet that I didn't think about what could have been in the ocean at all. So that helped me through the beginning times of getting back in the surf until the first time I ran into a shark into the surf. And so that was a bit of a major setback when I first seen a shark in the water, it was July, so that was from March till July. I was out surfing with some mates. We'd actually gone up the coast. I was starting to be able to put some weight on my arm and get up to my feet properly. And we went up the coast because the waves were fairly big, and we found a good surf spot. And I was paddling back out with a guy, and I didn't know him. We were just paddling out together because my arm was still in some sort of cast that I had on there. And he said, "Oh, you know, we were paddling out, and this shark swam straight past us, and he screamed." And I held up my arm and I said, "Look, they don't hurt too much." And he goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Oh, I was attacked in March." I said, "Nearly got my arm." And he goes, "Wow." He said, "I'm freaking out." He said, "And you're fine with it." And I was kind of fine with it then, but it wasn't until later on that it started to become a bit of a thing. That's, you think about what could have happened again in the surf. I got to, I think, a couple of weeks after that, I had a shark brush my feet while I was sitting on my surfboard. And that was a tough one. And another time, which was probably a month after that, I was out in the surf with just my son, and he turned and caught a wave, and I was waiting for the bigger one out the back, and as I was paddling to the wave, this shark came in with the wave, and I sort of moved a bit to the left, and then the shark moved over to the right, so it stayed in the same way I was. I sort of moved a little bit the other way, and it went the other way. And at the very last moment, when the wave was just about upon me, I spun around and paddled and caught the wave. And that was tough. I got out of the surf then, and I actually threw my surfboard into the scrub, and I just said, I just can't do this anymore. I sat on the beach and cried, and I went, wow, this is it. It's the end of surfing for me. And it was a tough thing because, I'd done good getting back and surf, but then all of a sudden it was not good again. And my young fella, he put his arm around me, he said, come on, Dad, we'll just go up the beach a bit further and we'll go back out. So he picked up my board and we walked up the beach, 100 metres, paddled back out, we caught a couple more waves. It wasn't comfortable at all, but it was probably what I needed for him to say, come on, Dad, suck it up. You'll be all right. And we did. So there's been a few of them moments where it's just doesn't look right, it doesn't feel right, so I just don't surf that day now. Go and do something else.
Is that your mentality, or it's a mentality of all surfers in general
I
to
think that
come
would
back?
be,
Yours?
yeah, I think it would be most surfers. Most surfers are keen to get back in. I guess we all know there is a very small risk of being attacked by a shark. And honestly, the chance of it happening again to me would be, the odds are in my favour, let's put it that way. But I do know people now who've been attacked more than once, and you go, wow, I now know these people, and it can happen again. So lightning does strike twice in the same place, and sharks can bite the same surfer twice. So, yeah, but the major mentality of surfers is, I just want to be in the water surfing, and I'll take the risk. But now I know what the risk is, and some people get freaked out. I've surfed with, I've done a few reports where the reporter wants to come surfing with me, and you go, righto. And I said, but here's the last thing, before we go in the water, as you put your leash on, your ankle strap for your leg rack for your surfboard. So you've got to say to yourself, am I prepared to die today for this surf? That's because that can be the result. And if you're prepared to do that, that's fine. If you're not prepared to do that, you just sit on the beach and I'll go catch a few waves and you can film them for your interview. That's fine. Because I don't want to force someone to go in the water, because then it's on me. We've got to all take responsibility for going in the ocean, and if we get attacked while we're there, we know the shark's out there. So, and I know the risk is very slim, but there is a risk.
The sharks, do they go? I mean, I read somewhere that they go for wetsuit because it's black. They think it's a whale or smaller fish. Is that some truth to that, or what?
I don't think anyone can actually answer that question. I've spent so many hours sitting down with scientists, the guys who are studying sharks, every day of the week. It's their full-time job, and
Mm.
that it's as random as there's something that happens. Obviously, like I've been privileged to sit down with many people who've been attacked by sharks and have this discussion, and there's instances where a shark has pushed other people out of the way to get to someone. So it's
Mm.
something has attracted the shark to that person. Something I did, or something about me in the water that day, made the shark think, well, I can get a feed out of that. I'm going to have a crack at it. And yeah, there's many people in our group who the sharks come back again and again, even when their mates are trying to get them out of the surf, and they've come back and had another bite while people are trying to get them out. And yeah, we're not on their diet usually. Because I guess if you're a shark and you think you're going to bite into a seal and you get a mouthful of fiberglass and rubber, you would go, that's not what I usually eat. But sometimes that shark will come back and have another go and another go, even though it obviously doesn't taste like it usually has. So it's, I don't believe all shark attacks are a mistaken identity thing, which we hear a lot of. There is instances where sharks will come back again and actually consume a person. So there is
Mm.
something that happens at that time that makes the human something that the shark wants to eat today, or will have a taste of, just to see what it's like. And whether it's a young shark growing up, or a hungry shark, or a sick shark, or whatever it be, there is a reason that sharks do bite people, and it's not always a case of mistaken identity. There is a dead set reason for what they do it. And some people in our group have been stalked by sharks, where they'll go round and round it before they come in and attack. So the shark would have seen by then that what they're chasing is not a seal, and decided that they'll still have a bite of it because obviously looks edible to them and smells edible or feels edible, whatever the sense they're using at the time. So obviously the wetsuit thing, I've tried it all. Like I've got a camouflage wetsuit, a one that fades into the background. It's actually called a fader wetsuit. It's made here in Newcastle in New South Wales. And when you look at the information on the website, it is absolutely brilliant. You see people in a black wetsuit compared to a fader wetsuit. And from a distance of 5 meters away, you can't really see the person in the fader, and you can see the one in the black wetsuit. I've tried the electronic devices on my surfboard. I use a simple device, shark eyes, which is a pair of eyes under the surfboard as well. We'll try anything because we're all looking for that one thing that's going to give me the edge. And I had a really good T-shirt at one stage, and it says, "I don't have to outswim the shark. I just have to outswim you." And that's the way, I guess, is if I've got devices on my surfboard that makes me less attractive to the shark, then that's going to help me. It mightn't help the guy beside me. I'll have to go and help him when he gets bitten. So, yeah, we all want that one thing. And, I'm heavily into shark deterrents, and especially personal ones, because, I take responsibility that I go in the surf. So I'd like to be able to take responsibility for making myself safe in there. And I want that one thing that I know is going to give me the best chance of survival if a shark does come and bite me again. And here in Australia, we're doing a lot of work regarding that, so it's quite positive. But getting surfers to take it up is the next issue, because the last thing you want to do when you go surfing is think about sharks all the time. You want to go and enjoy the surf and have that fun and have that freedom and that expression that you're going to get. If you're out there crapping your pants because you think there's a fish out there, you're better off grabbing a mountain bike and going mountain bike riding, because it'll be a lot more fun.
Many people get bitten by sharks and other animals, but only you created the Bite Club just 2 years after the attack. Why?
Because nobody else did. It's as simple as that. I looked for a support group. I reached out to support, and there was nothing really available. And I was fortunate because, once again, when I was in hospital, there was a young girl who was in hospital, same age as my children, and she was attacked a week before myself. So we met in hospital and we sat down and we had a chat, and it was such a great conversation because I understood where she was coming from as she was saying it. I was imagining, that was the exact same thoughts that I was having when I was getting attacked. And we both sat there for probably an hour or so, our first conversation we had, talking about our attacks, but, and how we were feeling and how we were recovering from it. But when I walked away from that conversation, I went, wow, there's something beneficial about this. And that stuck with me. And then I came out of hospital and I found all my mates were suffering as well, like just as bad as I was, if not even worse. And that was astounding to me, that the guys who didn't get hurt were still suffering similar to what I was. And then obviously when the nightmares start and later on the post-traumatic stress comes, it was by then I was already doing a few newspaper stories. But in them stories I would say to them, well, if you're going to talk to another shark attack survivor, I'd love to find out about how they're doing and how they're dealing with things. And maybe they've got the answers that's going to help me get through it. And so they did. I got put in touch with people. I'd ring them up. I'd go and visit them if they were, within a few hours drive of where I live. They would sit down and have a coffee or a beer and have a chat and see how we're doing. I started ringing up hospitals after shark attacks and going and visiting people in hospitals to say, hey, I'm going through this as well. This is what I've discovered so far. And yeah, what I found originally was a whole heap of people looking for the exact same thing I was, the answer. And the answer to something that there really is no answer for. We actually became the answer to each other. And that comforting conversation you have with another human who can truly understand what you're going through made such a massive difference to myself and obviously to a lot of other people in our group. That's how the group formed. And we started off with, I think 2 of us, 4 of us, 8 of us. The first time we actually got together, there was 7 of us got together and we went swimming with sharks at an aquarium just to I guess, put the fear behind is that, you can have a look at these fish and they're really not the big nasty thing that we're dreaming about every night. But it wasn't so much that. It was the time that we had together, sitting around having dinner and then great conversations. And, someone would start talking and you could see someone else just reliving their experience. You'd see it in their eyes and you go, wow, this is absolutely brilliant. And every time we get together, I witness that same thing. I see people taking something away from someone else, just sharing the good stuff and the bad stuff that they've had since their attack. And so, yeah, there was nobody else. There was nothing started. I was amazed that there was no support group, but we became that support group.
How do people find? I know people find it from all over the world. Is it Facebook or not just
Yeah,
Australia? It's all over, unfortunately, or fortunately for that reason.
yeah. I guess honestly, um, most of people find us mostly through the media. Doing stories such as this, where people go, "Oh, here's a podcast about a shark attack, so I'll listen to that. See what this clown's got to say," and then they hear about something called Bite Club, and it sort of sticks with them, or they read it in a newspaper, and then one of their friends might get bitten, or someone they know, and they go, "Oh, I've heard about this group." Um, we're we're close. We are on Facebook and Instagram, but we are a closed group because not
Yeah.
everybody in the world has the best interests of other people, and we found that out early. That I mean, when I was in hospital, some of the comments that would go on the newspaper stories or social media about me was unbelievable. And I thought, wow, I was a pretty good guy yesterday, and now I've been attacked by a shark. I'm everybody's worst enemy for some reason. It was astounding. And we see that all the time whenever there's a shark attack. So we've got someone with a smart ass comment to throw in there at someone, and it's your fault. You shouldn't have been in the ocean. Yeah, I've never met a shark attack survivor who doesn't take responsibility for being attacked. Like, we go in the ocean, these things happen, but you don't deserve the victim blaming that comes with it. I know we wouldn't do that well, most of us wouldn't do that if a girl gets raped on the way home from the shops or something like that. We wouldn't blame her for walking home from the shops alone, you know. So why would we blame someone to the extent of hatred just because they were attacked by a fish while they were out having a surf or a swim? So that is an amazing thing. And these people wanted to join our group just to tell us that we were, I don't know, just everybody. I mean, if you watch social media, there's always someone has something bad to say. And the world would be a much better place if people just typed it out and went and reread it and went, now, if somebody said that to me, would I be happy if someone said that to me? And you go, no, if I'm not satisfied that that would not affect me, I don't think I should be putting on that. That's a lesson we all learn. It's a lesson I've learned over the years that getting into an argument over someone is never going to get us anywhere. Um, that happened in the early days. We would try and defend ourselves to other people, and it just made them worse. And you just go, wow, I'm losing here, and I'm in the right. I believe I'm in the right. Like, it's not. I'm not hating the fish. I'm not hating people. I'm not going out killing sharks. So why are they abusing me? So I just go, have your say, and you're happy with your say, go ahead. I just won't take any attention of it. So so that's why we had to close our Facebook group up, and we've got nearly 600 members now. Sharks, lions, crocodiles, leopards, hippopotamus, bears from the States. We've even got a lady who was attacked by wolves. We got here in
Mm.
Australia, we've got wild dogs, which are dingoes. We've got just about any predator animal. We've got somebody in the group who's been attacked by that.
Mm. Did Bike Club help you yourself to overcome the physical emotional struggles after the attack?
Definitely, yes, and still does to the day. Well, Bike Club started 12 years ago. Well, it actually started, a couple of weeks after my shark attack. But yeah, it helps me because I get to see people get better, and I get to I do a bit of public speaking as well, and a bit of corporate type stuff where people want someone to do a bit of motivation type stuff, and my shark attack story gets me that attention, but it's the story that I always try to get across, and which is what I'm about, and it's what this is about, is that we're only put on this planet for a short time, 100 years if we're lucky. And if we can help somebody up who's down on the ground and get them walking away happy on their own again, then we've done something good. And if we can do that for one person or two people, or maybe even a few more, then we're doing the right thing. And if we all did the right thing, it'd be better. And that's the message I try to portray, and that's what Bike Club is about. It's people all over the world helping people that they're probably never going to meet. If they're lucky to, it's awesome. But they just want to help them with kind words and support when they're doing something good. And people post when they've done something good, or when they're competing in something that they never thought they'd be able to compete in again, like people who do running races with missing legs. And we've got a guy in our group who's going to be an Olympic snowboarder he's got no arms. Both arms were bitten off by sharks, and you go, people see that and they go, wow, I've only lost a hand, or I've only lost the use of a limb, but I've still got them. And look at this guy doing that. And we all win by just seeing that. And then we get to support him as well. And if we can help him get there as to what he needs to achieve, it helps us all achieve. And imagine if everyone done that in the world to their next door neighbor. It'd be so good.
Well, we'll be a brighter place. That's one of the reasons I started this this
Yeah.
podcast. I want to be positive and hear the stories, highlight the stories of people and transformation, resilience. What did you learn about yourself and the world after the attack?
I guess the world can be a cruel place. What I've learned about myself is I can be vulnerable in front of people. I can be vulnerable is not weakness. Vulnerability is just part of it, having a tough day. I can be strong. I am very resilient. I've got through quite a lot. Shark attacks probably I wouldn't say was the worst thing that happened in my life, but it seems to be the one that brought all of the previous traumas back into my life. And as men, when we're growing up and we're young and we're in our 20s or in our 30s, and anything that happens, we've got to keep fighting on. We've got to keep paying them all. You've got to keep going to work. So we just throw all that in a basket. And then, unfortunately for me, it was a shark attack that emptied it out. I mean, said, time to deal with all of this, Dave. And I'm still trying to deal with it. So it's a difficult thing. And, the world is a better place now than it used to be. People openly will talk about when they're struggling. And that is good. But people will also go and chase somebody and say, how are you doing? And actually mean what they're saying. I mean, in Australia, we say, how you going, mate? And we all expect the person to say, great, because that's the answer we want. We don't want to hear, well, as a matter of fact, I haven't slept properly for 3 months. My wife's left me. I'm nearly broke. I don't know what I'm going to do the rest of my life. And then when someone says that to you, then you ask the question. So now it's up to you to sit down and say, well, how can we get through this together? And I think if more people did that, when we ask that question to someone, and here in Australia, we have something called Are You Okay Day, which is you actually ask your good mates, honestly, are you okay? And you've got to listen to their answers. And it's the one day of the year where people will truly answer you if they're not okay. And I've been fortunate in some of the places where I've worked that because of what I do for Bike Club, they've made me the Are You Okay Day ambassador. And the first time it happened was just sprung on me, which was pretty unkind. I wasn't in the best place to start off with. But they just said, anyone have any issues, you just grab hold of Dave. They asked me to talk about, being not okay and telling people about your issues. And I think over the course of the next 3 to 4 months, I would have had 100 conversations with tradies, like hard-working tradesmen, blue-collar workers. And I was listening to the worst times of their life. And some were still struggling with it, some were getting through it, and some were just starting it. So as tough as that was, it was rewarding, as I helped some people come to grips with what they were dealing with, and also helped them to understand that it's not weak to talk to someone else about it and not just keep bottling other things off. So yeah, I think that's important to me, is to have people tell you that they're not doing well, and being able to say that is not a weakness. It's the truth. We're all struggling sometimes, and every now and then we need a helping hand to get through it.
What is the best? I know there are survivors, but there are families, friends, neighbors, co-workers who might struggle. People expect, how are you? And great, everything's great. But that person needs some love and support, needs a phone call or a card or a beer brought in the house. What would you recommend to the family from your personal experience? What was the most important that your friends, family, co-workers did for you that elevated you from the pain, from the help you to overcome this
I guess
tragedy?
to be, it's and it happens a lot when there's a serious shark attack near to where we live. Is I will get there'll be within an hour there'll be half a dozen good friends, either shark attack survivors or mates that I've known for quite a while, will ring me up and go, "Hey Dave, I've heard the news," and they know I've heard the news straight away because that's part of what happens. And they just want to check to make sure you're right. And just that somebody ringing up going, "I know this can be tough for you, but I just want to check to see if you're all right. And if you're not all right, you know, I'll bring a coffee round, we'll sit and have a chat. Or we don't have to chat. We can just sit by side and, just giving someone your time, which is really important. You mightn't know the exact words to say. And, I don't say, and even to people in our group, I don't say I know exactly how you feel, because I don't. I know how I would feel in that situation. But our thoughts and feelings come from our experiences and our life bringing upbringing in our life, and what our life situation is. So, if someone's maybe got the exact life situation to me, maybe they might feel the same way I do. But yeah, so I always say, tell me how you're feeling about that, or how can I help you? What can I do that's going to help you through this? And if it's just sitting here together and we'll share a beer or we'll share a cup of coffee, or we'll just go for a walk down the street and we just don't even have to say a word. That's what you need to do. Just let you know that I'm here to support you through that. And that's all people need. They just need to know that, they matter. Everybody matters in this world. And if somebody tells them that they matter, it's an important thing.
How do you celebrate March 23rd every year, if you do?
I, I go for surf, same spot, same time. And twice I've had pretty much the same experience where I've run into a shark on the same day. And try not to let that bother me. Um, we used to make it such a big deal. My first anniversary, I'd actually been surfing with another shark attack survivor that morning. I went and shared his first surf back in the ocean, and then I drove
Mm.
2 hours back home to have a surf with all my mates. And on the way home, I went to the bottle shop, grabbed a couple of cartons of beer and a pile of steaks and sausages, and while I paddled out for a surf with all my mates and all the guys who were there the afternoon I was attacked, and we celebrated the fact that I'd made it, 1 year since my shark attack, and I was doing the things I was loving with the people that I enjoy doing it with. And then we had a barbie, and I remember that first one because my partner Deb, I think she was cooking sausages or something on the barbie, and she said, "Don't check that out." And it was getting close to sunset because we paddled out the same time that I'd surfed, and instead of being dragged out 10 minutes after I hit the water, we surfed for a couple of hours, and it was starting to. When we were out standing around having a beer and a chat, the sun was going down, and as we watched the sunset, there was a cloud, and underneath the cloud there was another one that looked just like a shark swimming under the water, and everybody just went silent. And it was like, that was. She said, "There's a sign there. That's we'd actually seen a shark the minute I paddled out. I paddled straight on top of a shark, and so it was like, they're around, but today's a good day for it." So, and then I got to hear, which was really interesting. My mates would tell me, even the ones that weren't surfing, they would tell me what they were doing that day and how they felt when they heard of my attack, and and how much it freaked them out. So by me providing a couple of cartons of beer and $50 worth of meat, it was therapy for everyone as they were telling them their feelings about what had happened that day. And each time they tell that little story about what their day was like, it eases off a bit of their stress from the event. So, I found these are very healing events, and we do it quite a lot. Not to the extent that we originally did. 14 years since my shark attack now. Next one's 15. But we'll still celebrate. My family, my kid will come out, and my mum and dad, if they're still here and have a surf with me, my partner Debbie will come out and have a barbecue, and we'll make a lovely afternoon of it and a lovely evening. And I celebrate another year that I would have missed out on if I hadn't made it out that afternoon.
It's another birthday.
It
Truly.
is. We call it our new birthday. We also call it our sharkiversary.
Sharkiverse. Oh. Any advice you would give your 20-year-old self or any other surfers today?
Any advice I give myself as a 20-year-old surfer, I would say surf more, Dave, while you're younger. I had an interesting conversation today. I recently purchased some more foiling gear, which is not cheap, and I watched an old mate who's quite a fair bit older than myself. He went out, paddled out for a surf. He came back in. He didn't even catch a wave. The wave he came on, and he tried to get to his feet, and he's been struggling with back issues, and he rolled off the side of his board. That was his surf for the day. And I went, wow. I sometimes feel guilty the amount of money I spend on my surfing. And I went, you know what? I love surfing, and it's one of my major outlets for relieving of stress and friendliness with people in the ocean and stuff like that. And I just went, I will not feel guilty about that, because one day that would be me sitting on the beach saying to the young guy that walks past, yeah, I used to surf short boards. I used to rip when I was younger, and I used to foil, and I used to do all these things. You name it on a surfboard, I used to do it. I could stand up paddleboard, I bodyboard, I dive, I snorkel, I do everything in the ocean. But one day I'll be sitting on the beach and I'll be that guy who doesn't do that anymore because I physically can't. So as a younger me, I would be saying surf a lot more and enjoy your life. Everything else will happen, but make sure you enjoy what you do when you're younger, Dave, and be a nicer person. That's what I would tell myself as well. Be a nicer person.
Any fears?
Sharks, health, getting older. I seem to spend more time at the doctor's now than I do at the pub. So, yeah, I guess as I'm getting older, my fear is that my health will give way on me. In the ocean, sharks, I guess, to some extent, but not a huge amount. It's if I'm in the surf with a few people, it's not a problem. It's when I'm sitting there on my own, if everyone else catches a wave and I'm the one sitting out the back, that's when it will get to me. And as I said, I hydrofoil as well, which means that quite often I will find myself a kilometre off the beach on my own, falling off, and then you're in deep water and you're way out of any help that you can get. And that's the moment, as soon as I hit the water, that I think about shark. And then I get back on and I get up and I get going again. And then I go, well, I'm fine again now. So, yeah, so I guess that's one of my fears is shark. But yeah, my fear is missing out on things with my children and my grandkids now. When I nearly died last time, I didn't have any grandkids. I've got 5 grandkids and then another 5 on my partner's side. So, I've got 10 grandkids that I get to watch grow up now. I get to see I got to see my kids be parents. And so the fear of missing out on that would be hard and would be tough. So they're my fears, I guess, is, missing out on stuff.
Any regrets?
There's many things in my life I would have done different, but can I regret them? No, because I wouldn't have learned if I'd done them different. If I'd done them the right way every time, then I would never have learned anything. So I guess, like everybody, I've made some mistakes, lots of bad mistakes. I've lost my temper when I shouldn't. I've been angry when I shouldn't. I've not been nice to someone at one stage, and I go, you know what? if you could do all that again, I wouldn't do that. So I guess they're my regrets. Is I've learned from that and I go, righto, that's bad behavior. Don't do that. And so that's what I'm learning to do, is to be a better person as I get older. I guess the wisdom of age comes, and I guess everybody feels the same way, as you get older, you go, why did I waste all my time on that when I was younger? And was it really worth getting angry because somebody did something that I've got no control over and I've got no way of changing it anyway? So why get angry about that? But we still do. We all do that. So it's just the wisdom of age is just to say, afterwards, when you've got angry or you're upset about something, you go, did you really need to do that? And you go, no, you dickhead. And then so you go, no, you'll be all right.
What's your proudest achievement?
My children. I've got two wonderful children who they just they're much better humans than I am. I have to say that. I see my son will go out of his way to help anyone he can. My daughter's the same. They're both married people who are beautiful humans as well. And so, yeah, I guess that's my biggest achievement is my kids, and that's the legacy I guess I leave the world is by, we did have three children, but unfortunately one didn't make it. So I've got two wonderful children who are, going to follow my name for the rest of their life, I guess, and they're going to remember their dad, and hopefully my grandkids remember their dad and their granddad, and yeah, hopefully I have an effect on their life somewhat, or they think about me sometimes when I'm gone, and that would be nice.
You have a magic wand. What would only 3 wishes, what would that be?
3 wishes. I guess number one would that nobody else got to feel the pain of being attacked by a fish. That would be nice. If we could figure out that magic bullet that stops people getting attacked, that would be awesome. Number two, I guess, is for a fairer world. I'd like to see the world a bit fairer, and people be able to work hard and achieve for it, and not get ripped off by somebody. So that would be good. And I guess number three would be less of the horrible stuff that we see on the news. This, stuff like been happening in Gaza and places like that. You just, for whatever reason, people are fighting. There's got to be a better way than that. That's not the way.
Or what makes you laugh?
What makes me laugh? I find humour in lots of things. I've got that, unfortunately, that dark humour that comes with being Australian. Watching someone trip over with a beer in their hand and they lose a beer, or throw a pie on someone's face by accident, that sort of stuff. But just a good joke always makes me laugh. And then just hanging out with friends, having them conversations that just get more and more organic as you go. And then it's the Aussie way is to, like, we call it taking the piss out of each other, which is not insulting each other, but just little jokes about your bad points. And to be able to laugh at yourself is good, and then to laugh at yourself while everyone else is, and then I think that's a great thing. We have a good sense of humour in Aussie, and when you're sitting around, especially a bunch of years, and maybe having a beer or two, or having a feed or a coffee, and you're all having a laugh at each other's expense, but nobody's actually getting insulted by it, and you just them days when you can, them days where you can't even breathe because you're laughing so much, they're the favourite days.
Describe your life in one word.
Wonderful.
The last question I ask all the guests: what do you find extraordinary in every day?
The strength in people. I'm one of the luckiest people in the world. I know so many inspirational people who overcome on a daily basis, and so I see the inner strength that gets them through these things. So, yeah, that's the most wonderful thing to get to see.
That was Dave Pearson. Dave, thank you very much for being here, telling your wonderful story.